I'm really happy to do this. This is one of those really great Passover desserts because it's not actually a Passover dessert. It just happens to work for Passover because there's nothing in it that isn't kosher for Passover. So this is a recipe that you could pull out of your back pocket when someday, in hopefully the not too distant future, when you could have people at your house again. So, you know, dinner parties or whatever, this totally works. It's also really customizable, as I'll show you. So if, for example, people in your house don't like desserts with coffee, as is the case with people in my house, you could skip the coffee, you could skip the liqueur, you could change up the liqueur. So, you know, as we're getting to those steps, I'll talk about it. But basically, this is really, I mean, there's no baking, you know, we're gonna essentially dump a bunch of stuff in a bowl, whip it together, and call it dessert. A couple of things that I want to talk about just as far as the ingredients go. The first is that we are using raw eggs, and to make them food safe, because we want to obviously avoid some of the sketchy aspects of using uncooked eggs in a recipe. There are two things that you could do. So one thing to know about the risk of salmonella when you're using raw eggs is that it is bacteria that comes from the shell, not from inside the egg. So to mitigate the likelihood of getting sick from using raw eggs, you want to make sure that you're killing all of the bacteria on the shell. And you could do that two ways. One is you could buy pasteurized eggs, and then you don't have to worry about it. The other, which is what I have done, is you can stick your uncooked egg, so boil some water on the stove, which you could do right now as we're talking. You only need a little bit. And you're gonna toss your eggs, not toss them, gently place your eggs into the boiling water for 40 seconds. And that kills all of the bacteria on the outside of the shell, and then your eggs are safe to use. Don't let them go for longer than 40 seconds because then you start to cook the inside, and then our recipe doesn't work because we're actually going to be separating the yolks and the whites. So that is the first note about the eggs that we're using. The second thing that I want to mention is about the chocolate. So this is one of those recipes where there are very few ingredients. And so we want to make sure that because we're using so few ingredients, the ingredients we're putting into it taste really great. So you want to, where possible, use the best chocolate that you can get your hands on. In the current climate with grocery shopping the way it is, the best chocolate that I could get my hands on today was Toll House chocolate chips. And I'll tell you the truth, they're gonna work just fine because Toll House chocolate chips are delicious. So if that's all that you happen to have in your kitchen, you're in great shape. If you could get your hands on some really, really, really good 70% cocoa chocolate, that's great too, but we'll use what we have to work with and it's gonna be fantastic. And the same goes for the olive oil. So you want to generally in this recipe use the best quality olive oil you can get your hands on because you're going to taste it, and it's not going to add an oily greasiness to this dish, but it is going to add some really delicious sort of slightly bitter, slightly spicy, floral-y notes. Sort of the best parts of olive oil should come out in this dish, and it's a really nice complement with the chocolate. So good olive oil and good chocolate really do make a difference here. Anybody have any questions about anything else that was on the ingredient list? I will tell you that the coffee and espresso powder are totally optional, as is the liqueur. I think I recommended Grand Marnier or Chambord or something like that. If you wanted to try rum, that would work. I haven't tried it, but I happen to think that bourbon would be delicious, although not kosher for Passover, I don't think. But another time of the year, you could give that a try. Or you could totally leave it out and just like straight chocolate and olive oil flavors are going to be really delicious in this dish.
Suzy?
Yes.
Can you give an example of your choice of chocolate and your choice of olive oil, should we have a choice at some point later in our lives?
Sure. You're asking me about brands? So for the chocolate, I mean, I think that anything that Trader Joe's has really good qualities, like 70. I would look more carefully at the cocoa solids content than the actual brand. So really dark, rich chocolate is going to be sort of 60% cocoa or 70% cocoa, something sort of up in that range is what you are looking for. And then as far as olive oil, I mean, you want to cook, in this case, because you want the very best flavor, you want extra virgin. And I like California olive oil a lot. More to come on this topic because I'm actually in the process of writing a book about olive oil. But what I am actually learning right now about California olive oil is that because they're sort of new to the olive oil game and are competing with producers in Europe who've been at it for a long time, in order to be competitive, California has made their certification standards so unbelievably high, even higher than they are in Europe. So if you're getting certified extra virgin olive oil from California, in all likelihood, it's a really fantastic product. So I think that that's something to look for. I happen to like California olive oils for that reason, but anything that you really like, it's a little bit of personal taste. But extra virgin is sort of the phrase that you're looking for. It's going to be the most flavorful. Anything else, or should we start cooking? Okay, so what we're going to do first, I think I can't remember if I posted the whole recipe. If not, I will get that out to everybody. But what you could do, this step that I'm doing for you right now, you could absolutely do in a stand mixer. Just because it's easier to show you, I'm going to do it in a bowl with a whisk, which also works. But what you are going to do is you're going to start with 3 egg yolks. So I've separated my eggs, which you could do just by cracking it right into your hand and letting the white fall through your fingers, and then you throw your yolks into another container. You could also do, if anybody knows the trick, where you go back and forth with the 2 shells, you could do that. But you want to separate your yolks from your whites. And I will just notice that the one sort of nitpicky piece about this recipe is when you separate your whites and your yolks, you need to make sure you don't get any yolk in with your whites, because we're going to be whipping the egg whites later, and it really doesn't work very well if you get any yolk in there. So you just have to be a little bit careful about that. So we've got egg yolks going into our bowl, and confectioner sugar is going in next. And I'm going to just whisk those together. And all you're looking for here is sort of a smooth consistency and kind of a pale yellow color. If you are using your espresso and your liqueur, those would go in now. We had a minor revolt in our house yesterday, so I'm going to skip that step. All right, so you can see it's sort of uniform and no lumps, pale yellow.
I like it.
Mitch would just like to chime in that he liked the coffee stick. All right. And next in goes our olive oil. Okay. You're going to go slowly here, otherwise you're going to end up wearing olive oil. So slow to begin. And I'm happy to slow down for people who are cooking along. Just yell at me. I'm going too quickly. All right, it's gonna look all wrong at first. I don't know if you could see, it looks sort of like a broken vinaigrette, but you sort of keep at it for a minute and it will come together. It will actually, have faith, it will emulsify. The egg yolk does that for you. All right, so just to review, we've got egg yolks, we've got confectioner sugar, and we have got our olive oil.
Leave your message.
Hi, I'm totally lost already. Can you give a quick recap and just
Okay, so tell me what you've done so far.
Okay, I'm just what went into the bowl first?
So the bowl was egg yolks and confectioner sugar.
Okay. Then we put the olive oil in.
And the olive oil. That's as far as I've gone.
Okay.
Okay.
How much confectioner sugar?
The confectioner sugar is, I think it's
So you just mute the
2/3 of a cup. Does anybody have the ingredients?
You said 2/3 of a cup, yes.
2/3 of a cup. Okay. Are you checking it? Oh, Maddie has confirmed.
that's what
She
you
was
gave
my
us.
Sue.
That's what you gave
Okay.
us, with 2/3 of a cup.
Okay, so after I have my chocolate melted already, so you want to melt your chocolate, and you could do that. You have to ask Daddy to help you with that. You can do that in the microwave on high power in like 30-second spurts, just like giving it a could also super low heat, and just keep an eye on it because there's kind of nothing sadder than the smell of burnt chocolate. Starts out. So
Wait, how do you do the chocolate?
how do I do the chocolate? Put it in the microwave for 30 seconds, and then you check it. You sort of stir it with a spoon, and then you put it in for 30 seconds again, and then you take it out and you stir it with a spoon. To melt this chocolate, this is 6 ounces of chocolate. It took me about 2 minutes to melt it, and then you want to let it come to room temperature. Okay?
What happens if you get a little yolk in the
Is
eggs?
everybody in good shape? Sorry, I missed that, Asher.
What happens if you get a little yolk in the eggs?
You want to try to scoop it out. It will just make it so that your egg whites don't whip up quite enough. We're going to get to that part really soon. Yes? Okay, so I'm just going to move on. We'll have plenty of time for people to catch up. So I'm just scraping my chocolate into my bowl that has the egg yolks, the confectioner sugar, and the olive oil, and it may or may not also have coffee, espresso powder, and or liqueur. And just know if you're using those other ingredients, you're adding a little bit of extra liquid. So in the end, yours might not look as firm as mine does, but have no fear because it will, we're going to put the finished product in the refrigerator to set, and yours will set. You will look at it and think I've just made soup, but it's not how it's going to be in the end. All right, so now I'm just going to whisk in my chocolate. How's everybody doing?
How long does the chocolate go to the microwave for?
So you do it for 30 seconds and then you keep checking it. So you could do 30 more seconds if it's not melted yet. Okay.
But when you melt the chocolate, you have to actually stir it. Sometimes the chocolate chips still look like they're hard. They didn't like come together yet, but if you stir them, they just all melt into each other sometimes.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. All right. So here's what I've got. This is, you sort of want to just like sit in here and take a bath. This is the eggs, the olive oil, the sugar, and the chocolate. Otherwise known as the secret of life, the meaning of life. Okay. So this I'm going to set aside. Is everyone more or less where I am? Kind of. Okay, so far, separate the egg. Oh, thank you, Jen. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to put this to the side, and the next thing that we're going to do is whip our egg whites. So I have my 3 egg whites, and I'm just doing it in a clear bowl so that you can see it. Normally, I would do this in my stand mixer, but for the sake of being able to show you a little bit better what I'm doing, I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to use a hand mixer, which is approximately the same age as me. But so here, this is a relic. So, okay. So we're just going to beat the egg whites, and what we're going for here, and it doesn't take very long. This is sort of some kitchen magic. It's really fun for kids to see. We go from liquid here, and we're going to end up with a relatively stiff foam. We don't want super, super stiff peaks here, but I'll show you sort of what we're going for. So you'll forgive the noise for just a minute. Oh, and I'm going to interrupt myself for 1 second. So if you were doing this in your stand mixer, this is the attachment that you want to use. You want to use the big whip, not the paddle, because you won't get the stiff peaks with anything other than this. And you want to crank your machine to as high as it will go. You can do this by hand. You probably want to have a few friends help you because it's a pretty good arm workout otherwise. You can see already what's happening here. You see what's happening? It's really getting thick and foamy. Okay, so you can see that it's kind of still hanging on to my beaters, and that's what you want. That's how you sort of know, and it forms, we call this soft peaks because they sort of, it will make, if you pull your beaters out, I don't know how well you can see, it sort of forms a peak, but then they kind of fall over. And that's essentially what we're going for here. So this is, believe it or not, we're pretty much at the last step here. So I'm going to take my chocolate mixture, bang it off my whisk. And then you're going to want to grab a rubber spatula. And we're going to incorporate these egg whites 1/3 at a time. So, and the technique that we're going to use to get them incorporated into our chocolate is folding. And I'll show you how to do that. And I will tell you the reason that we fold is because we don't want to knock all of the air out. The egg whites are what give this mousse, it's what makes it mousse, it's what makes it nice and light and airy. So I'm going to start by putting in about 1/3 of my egg whites. So I'm just going to blob it in like that. And then what you kind of want to do is take your spatula and you are actually folding it. So you're going sort of underneath the chocolate and folding it over on top of the egg whites. So you're not stirring it. You're really gently sort of carefully and lovingly and deliberately folding. Let's see if I can show you a little better. Folding it over like this. You're sort of cutting into the middle of the mixture and folding it from behind. Okay. So we're gonna do that. And you don't wanna see any hunks or blobs of white business in there. You wanna get it all nicely incorporated. Okay, and then you can add the second, third, and the same technique of folding gently. How's everyone doing? Okay, and I will also tell you that I had a question earlier from my mother-in-law who wanted to know if you could use Splenda in place of the confectioner's sugar. And I will tell you, I have not tried it. I think the confectioner's sugar probably helps give a little bit of structure to this, but it should still work. I think it will still set up just fine. So if you wanted to make a sugar-free version, I think that you could probably try Splenda and it should work. Okay, so I've added my last third of egg white. So I've got some big blocks here, so I'm gonna fold the rest of this in. All in the wrist. Okay, so I'll show you what I've got here. It's totally uniform, right? So, oops, that's a lie. I found some streaks. Okay, so it's really all nicely incorporated. And that is, believe it or not, that's it. So what you could do is then transfer this mixture to one big serving bowl, or you could do some smaller ones. I'm going to show you what I did yesterday. So you could put these into like little small dessert bowls or ramekins or whatever. I actually, for my kids, because sometimes they want a little something after dinner, but I don't want to give them an enormous portion. So I like to put this kind of thing in little egg cups, which is sort of fun. We give them a tiny little spoon and they have a really good time eating like a sort of a miniature dessert. So you could do that, or a larger bowl, and then you could even bring it in a big bowl to the table and just serve it like that. But so what you're going to want to do is transfer this, what you just made, which is going to look a little soupy, to whatever container you want. You're going to cover it with plastic wrap or whatever sort of covering you want, and keep it in the fridge, and it will set up in a couple of hours, and then you're good to go. And that's really it. Any questions? Oh, and I should say that you can garnish it with berries if you like. A little flaky sea salt is really delicious. You could do a sprinkling of cinnamon. You could garnish this lots of different ways.
Suzy, how many servings do you consider this?
So I think that this recipe probably makes like 4 to 6. And we were speculating on what would happen if you froze it. And I think that if you could freeze it, if you wanted to have a frozen dessert, you can't. I don't think you could freeze it and then thaw it and serve it again. My guess is that probably wouldn't work, although I have to say I haven't tried it.
While we're finishing up, I want to make sure to properly thank Suzy again for showing us these things. Really, really appreciate this. It's amazing. Again, we're recording this. We'll have the recording of it posted on our Facebook page, on our Passover landing page, on our website. As a heads up, for those of you who enjoy cooking with Suzy, as we all do, she's teaching again next week at the same time, same day, where she's teaching her ultimate foolproof brisket. If you'd like to see a far less talented chef in action, I'm going to be teaching on Thursday how to make matzah from home. It might not be tasty, but it will be matzah. And then on Friday, my wife and I are going to teach you about how to make Sephardic choruzet that you can mold into a shape of a pyramid, which should be fun as well. All of the links, everything is on our Passover landing page. But for now, thank you, Suzy, for this is the second demonstration you've done, and it looks very, very yummy. We recorded it. We're going to make it later. I see a lot of people out there making it as well. And I hope you guys have a great day. And this really helps to see you all. So thanks, and thanks to Suzy.